Welcome to the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. Our mission is to help executives thrive as cyber risk managers. Your hosts are Kip Boyle, CEO of Cyber Risk Opportunities, and Jake Bernstein, Cybersecurity Counsel at the law firm of Newman DeWars. Visit them at cyberriskopportunities.com and newmanlaw.com.
So, Kip, what are we going to talk about today?
Jake, today we're going to talk about the major cyber risk of private equity firms.
Okay, and what is that cyber risk?
So it's when one or more of their portfolio companies is so damaged by a cyber attack that they lose most or even all of their investment in that company.
That sounds bad. So in order to talk about this, are you going to review an actual case?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, there is a real case, and it's pretty recent. So, and I think we should take it apart and see what we can learn.
All right. Well, let's get this show started. And where do you want to begin?
So let's begin by reviewing what a private equity firm is. This is important because although maybe members of our audience are very familiar with private equity, I assume that there are a number of people who only are superficially familiar with it. And this is where I'm going to disclaim, and I love borrowing from your jargon, that I am a cyber risk expert, but I'm not an expert in private equity. I think I know enough to do the show, but so I'm going to be careful. So listeners, if we get anything really wrong, be sure to let us know. Send us a LinkedIn direct message or drop us an email. Let us know if we got anything really, really wrong here. But I want to keep it simple. So the reality can be very, very complicated. There's all kinds of different permutations of private equity strategies and the way that you can form the business and so forth. But so let's just keep it simple. And so let me just tell you a few things about what a private equity firm is. First of all, it's an investment management company, and it provides a source of money for companies that have the potential to get bigger and more valuable within a 5 to 7 year period. Now, where does the PE firm get its money? Typically, it gets it from a number of wealthy individuals and institutional investors. So they get money from those folks, they pool that money, and then they use it as a fund in order to go and actually take ownership stakes positions in firms that they believe have the potential to grow quickly and to increase in value very fast. So I think of it as conceptually as kind of like a mutual fund, except private equity invests in a few private companies rather than a large number of public ones. So does that making sense to you so far, Jake?
I think so. It sounds a little bit like venture capitalism, and that's, I guess, what it is. But we wouldn't necessarily think of them in the exact same terms as we would a venture capital company.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So venture capital is very conceptually similar. You've got people who have money, and they're looking for companies that can grow and become more valuable. But I think while there's some overlap, right? So you can have a private equity firm that specializes in funding startups or companies that are maybe just a few years old. What I notice is that a lot of private equity firms are focused more on what I would call the middle market. So these are companies that are more or less proven in their product market fit. They're generating revenue. They're not really considered startups anymore. So they're not risky in that sense. Venture capitalists are looking to make huge profits by coming in super early on something that's going to get really big. And I think of Uber as one example. All these unicorns, these so-called unicorns, is an example of venture capital, which I think, could be thought of as a form of private equity. So, but a PE firm is going to get ownership in the company, and typically they're going to get a majority ownership, and they do that because they've just put a lot of money in, and they want control. So that's very common. Right. So that's my simple, quick thumbnail sketch of what a PE firm is. Would you add anything?
Not right now. I think that is pretty much what we are That's how we should conceptualize it.
Okay, great. And I only did that so that we can talk about the actual case here, right, of cyber risk gone wild.
Yep, let's do that.
All right. So let's talk about a Denver company called Colorado Timberline. And if you Google search Colorado Timberline cyber attack, you're going to find a lot of good stuff, because that's what I did. And let me just say right up front, they're out of business. They're bankrupt, and it happened because of a cyber attack. So Colorado Timberline was a mid-sized promotional items printing company. So if you've ever gone to a trade show and you see all the swag that the vendors put out, t-shirts, coffee mugs, pens, keychains, and then the banners that they hang printed on, vinyl or foam core, right? So Colorado Timberline did all that stuff. They even would do etching on glass. I mean, everything that you would expect in terms of, promotional items. I mean, if you had a logo, they would put it on pretty much whatever you wanted. So that's pretty much what it was. And it was also a somewhat capital intensive company, because they had printers, and they had lots of them and lots of different types of them. They had these, and I've seen photos online, they've had these wide carriage printers with rolls of, coated papers feeding into them. I mean, we're talking like 5-foot wide printer carriages on, and then the whole chassis of this printer was just enormous. I mean, it had to be located in a warehouse. It was just, gigantic. This is not some little work group laser printer that you can just kind of move around whenever you wanted to. Laser etching equipment, tons of inventory, right? So, all these keychains and mugs and whatever they were going to personalize, they had to buy a lot of that, and then they had to personalize it, and then they had to ship it, right? So they even had forklifts, right? So they had a lot of tangible stuff. And their office and their warehouse was co-located about 5 miles northeast of downtown Denver. And if you look on Google Map, you'll see that they're just north of Interstate 70. And the founder and president was a guy named Dan Green. And the first mention of Dan and his company that I found online was in September 2006. So not a startup in the sense that that they came out of nowhere and then started to shoot like a star into the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd been around for a while and had established themselves, and they must have been attractive enough in terms of their business potential to get private equity investment. And one thing I know about private equity investors is they're very shrewd. They do their homework, and they're only going to put their money into a company that has a lot of potential. And so even though Colorado Timberline was privately held and did not publish how many employees they had, how much revenue they generated, there were some estimates that I found online. So LinkedIn estimated that they had between 200 and 500 employees. I found smaller numbers elsewhere on other websites. I found various revenue estimates, like there's a site called owler.com, and they said they estimated $23 million a year. I don't know. But I'm telling you all this because I think it's important for the audience to realize that this was a real company that real people worked really hard to actually build, right? This is like the foundation of the American economic system.
It is. It's a significantly. It was a significant medium business for sure.
Definitely, with the potential to become much larger.
Much larger, yeah.
Generate profits, right? I mean, most jobs in the United States are jobs at small, medium businesses. And this, I think, is a Colorado Timberline, I think, was a very prototypical poster child type company. So, and again, it's really important for people to realize this, I think, because these are the companies that are getting hurt, and they're real, and a lot of them too.
I think it's easy for people to look at a cyber attack victim who gets wiped out and say, it's a typical human reaction of, oh, well, that's not that's not me. They're somehow different.
Mm-hmm.
They made this mistake here.
Yeah, they had it coming to them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a natural thing to do, and it has some value to do that analysis always. But I think at the same time, I would imagine that this company felt that way as well. Like, it's not going to happen to us. So when did the so you've got roughly 200 to 500 employees, you know, 20 million or so in revenue. When did the PE firm get involved?
So in June of 2017, Colorado Timberline becomes backed by private equity. So if they started on or around 2006, so it's 11 years, right? If I'm counting on my fingers here and doing the math, so they've been operating for like 11 years, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, private equity comes in and acquires them. And actually, they're acquired by two companies: Frontenac, which is based in Chicago, and Charter Oak Equity, which is based in Connecticut. I don't know much about these firms. I've browsed their websites, and so, I've got a little bit of a sense for what their investment strategy is. I don't know why they both invested in Colorado Timberline. So that would be an interesting thing to find out. But in any event, June of 2017.
And I think that action right there shows that this company had real potential, because, private equity firms, as a rule, don't go around investing in random companies. That's just not how private equity works.
No, definitely not. They're not diversifying their investments among thousands of companies as a mutual fund would. They've maybe got a basket of 12,
Yep.
something like that, 10.
And they're oftentimes putting a lot of energy and effort into analyzing each of those companies specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could probably think of it as a full body cavity search. When they're thinking about doing an acquisition or an investment. So so two ostensibly very very smart, studious private equity firms in June of 2017 put money into Colorado Timberline.
Okay.
All right. So now, here's where it gets hairy. So what wiped all this out? Well, just over 1 year after the acquisition, so August of 2018, on Colorado Timberline's Facebook page, they make an announcement that they've suffered a major cyber attack. They don't say what it is, but my guess in reading it and reading in between the lines, probably a form of ransomware. But they're not releasing a lot of information about this. But what they are talking about is the impact to their customers, and they're saying, my goodness, we're so sorry. Orders are delayed, and we're really struggling here. So that's the first time that they talk about it publicly, is about a year later. And then just 1 month later, so on September the 12th, 2018, on their Facebook page, they say, we're done. We're throwing in the towel. We've had this devastating ransomware attack, and we're out of business effective immediately. So sorry. And their website goes offline the very next day. And there are news articles that start to become published about their bankruptcy and how customers are being left in the lurch. And if you do a Google search right now, you should have no trouble seeing them. And then January 10th, 2019, all of Colorado Timberline's tangible assets go up for auction. So I'd said a moment ago that I'd seen photographs of their, super wide carriage printers and their laser etching equipment and their forklifts. Then that's because they were all photographed and they were all auctioned online. So every tangible asset is gone now.
Wow. So that's a swift end to what was, really a growing company. Just been backed by two private equity firms, sufficiently sized, and kind of in the blink of an eye, it's gone.
Yeah, really, very swift. Made their customers' head spin. I've seen, and you can see if you want, lots of people talking online about, we paid money for promotional items. Are we ever going to see them? I remember somebody saying, our stuff was on the dock, ready to be picked up, to be delivered to us. Can we come by and collect it ourselves? They definitely, left a smoking crater in the ground in terms of their customers. And you think about people out of business, right? Or people, out of a job. Even if there was less than 200 people on the payroll, you're talking about a lot of people that have to go find new jobs now. And I know that employment is at a historic low. So I hope they all have landed on their feet and are doing fine. but who wants that? Who wants that? And I think this is the thing that I struggle with the most here. Because I think it's one thing for a company to go out of business because it was a bad business. Maybe it was an unethical business. Perhaps it didn't sell its products and services for a reasonable price. There's all kinds of reasons why I think in a capitalist system, a business, could and should go out of business, but not for this reason. This is an act of war in my mind, and I can't help but to think that. So
No,
this is wrong.
It's definitely wrong, and it's definitely being this company, Colorado Timberline, was definitely a victim of some form of attack. And it would be great if we knew more, because obviously the more we knew, the better we could analyze this incident. But I think that what you can get from this is the necessity to conduct, cybersecurity related due diligence, just no matter what the occasion. If you're, particularly if you're a private equity firm, you probably need to be doing cybersecurity risk assessments on all your potential investment targets.
Yeah. So pre-investment and post-investment too. I mean,
Yeah.
this is after the money went in. And I don't know what due diligence they did going into it. But whatever it was insufficient because this company got taken over. And I'm not all that, I don't feel all that awkward that I don't know too much about the specific piece of malicious code and how it all went down, because my guess is that we could go pull the records off of another case where we do know a lot, another company being attacked by ransomware, and it would probably be very, very similar, right? So my guess is they lost control of all their computers, which means they can't take orders, they can't fulfill orders, they can't ship finished product, they can't collect money owed to them. This is a small company in Colorado, but the effect is not that different from the effect, say, of NotPetya on Merck Pharmaceuticals. They lost control over all their computers. Maersk, the shipping company, same thing happened to them. FedEx in Europe has a subsidiary called TNT. They lost control over all of their computers. They couldn't accept new shipments. They didn't even know where the shipments that they had in their possession, they didn't even know where they all were. They didn't know how to deliver them. They just kept stuffing them into warehouses up to the ceilings and then some. So I don't think this is any different for a small company than it is for the very large ones. And unfortunately for the private equity firms, maybe they'll get back pennies on the dollar. I don't even know if they're going to get anything back. I mean, you auction off all this tangible equipment, but there's closing costs, and I don't know that.
Well, the court would have, so bankruptcy. One thing I am familiar with is the bankruptcy procedure here, and the bankruptcy is going to dispose of pretty much all the assets.
But a company like that is going to have some tangible assets, but I just can't imagine that, as expensive as that equipment is at auction, it's probably not going to generate a lot of money. I don't think it's going to come anywhere near close to recovering the investment.
Not only would it not, I mean, they'd be lucky if it recovered, even if it even paid for the outstanding debts. I mean, a company like Colorado Timberline, even if it's doing, 23 million might be a lot in revenue, but what's the cash flow, right? And I think what we have to ask ourselves here is, what's the difference between a company like this and a company like, Maersk or FedEx? And the answer is, quite honestly, cash on hand and resources to come back. And
right.
And I would bet that this type of company was operating on a relatively razor thin kind of cash flow basis there. And again, I'm a cybersecurity attorney. I'm not a finance guy or a highly, not quite sure if I'm using the right terms, but my point really is that a ransomware attack that you're not prepared for doesn't have to do all that much actual damage to take you out permanently.
Yeah, that's true. So that reminds me that during an earnings call in June of 2019, the CEO of Federal Express, I still call them Federal Express, so FedEx, made a comment on the earnings call that essentially said if TNT was not a subsidiary of FedEx at the time of the NotPetya cyber attack, they would have been bankrupt. That the only reason that that company survived is because FedEx, as a parent corp, infused all the money that was necessary to keep them from going out of business. And
Yep.
this, I don't understand why this is not more widely reported. This is a material. This is a major, thing for us to realize is that cyber attacks can put multi-billion-dollar companies out of business. I mean, that is amazing.
Well, and I think that one of the there's definitely a kind of a breach fatigue that has in the news cycle. And I think the problem with focusing on data breaches are interesting, right? Because they don't necessarily have anything like the same immediate effect that a ransomware attack would, right? Let's just say that Colorado Timberline had been the victim of a data breach instead of a ransomware attack,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened is that all of their customers' names were leaked to the internet, right? Now, if we assume that that's even a problem in the first place, it doesn't affect it. It's embarrassing, perhaps, but it doesn't affect their operations, right? But the problem with a ransomware attack is that it directly impacts the ability of any company to do day-to-day business. And I think back to also part of NotPetya, a very large international law firm, DLA Piper, uh, was its entire operations were shut down for 5 days. And if you think about the amount of money that cost them, um, it's staggering. They have 1,000 attorneys, none of whom could bill for 5 days.
Well, lost revenue, but then all the carrying costs of just being a
Yep.
business are continuing to accrue. And when you're a professional services firm, you're selling the time of your people.
You
I
are.
mean, it's
Now,
very direct.
at the same time, though, if you think about it, a company or a professional services firm like DLA Piper is actually in a position to survive that type of attack much easier uh, than a company who's extremely dependent on a constant flow of cash and goods out the door.
Right.
Colorado Timberline, I think, is the quintessential example of a company that you know has a very hard time surviving even a few days of business cessation as a
Hmm.
result of a cyber attack.
And I
And
got to imagine they didn't even have insurance to cover this, right? Because if they had, perhaps they'd still be in business.
well, I think what's clear is that not only did they likely not have insurance, they were also, uh, I think it's fair to say, rather unprepared. Um, Now we don't know that for sure. It's possible that this was a situation where the company was being reasonable, and this was just a unusually destructive cyber attack. But at the same time, everything we know about ransomware attacks are that they are opportunistic, they are relatively random, and they are eminently recoverable from if you are prepared.
Right. Yep. I mean, it's like a hurricane. You see the hurricane coming and you can get prepared, but you really should have done your preparations before the storm ever got named. Um, I think of ransomware attacks as less like a hurricane though, and more like a sudden, extremely severe earthquake, something that can't be predicted but is catastrophic, when it hits. Now you can survive that, but only if you've done the preparation work.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
I might say I actually I'm gonna adjust your metaphor there because I think in Earth the problem I actually don't think of it as an earthquake because earthquakes are incredibly rare and unusual, right? I think of I think a tornado is maybe a better example for ransomware
mm,
because like everybody knows that there's going to be X number of tornadoes every year, and
hmm
that number is usually in the hundreds, right? If you live in an area where tornadoes exist, there are going to be tornadoes every single year.
And many of them.
And what you don't know at any given time is where it's going to strike, how much damage it's going to do, how big it is. But you know that there's going to be tornadoes.
Mm-hmm.
I think ransomware is much more like a tornado insofar as we know it's going to happen. We know there's going to be X number of ransomware attacks every year. We just don't know who and how big.
Yeah, no, I think that's a much better, much more apt analogy. Tornadoes, yeah, strikes without warning. There's a lot of them. They're devastating. You can prepare for them. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I think that ransomware is, and that's kind of what it does, right? It's like a tornado going through your data systems.
Yeah, it really is, and flinging everything around so you can't find your stuff.
Yeah. So, I think that this is a really unfortunate, but also very important cautionary tale. I think that I agree with you that the the financial harm to companies like TNT and Maersk and all these other large companies goes underreported because at the end of the day, there's a huge number of businesses that will have bad quarters here and there, right? And
yeah,
and the thing is that what we need to do though is not be complacent because, well, none of those companies went out of business.
right.
Well, they didn't, but they're also some of the largest companies in the world, and I think that the FedEx earnings call that you mentioned is incredibly instructive. If TNT, that subsidiary, which is, I think, as you said, FedEx's European arm,
Yep.
if they had not been part of one of the two largest delivery companies the planet has ever seen, they'd be gone.
They would be gone, and that's shocking.
That is shocking because TNT on its own was not a small little company. It was still delivering to the much of Europe.
Right. I mean, its major competitor was DHL. DHL is, basically the German post office. It's
Right.
big. It's big. Yeah. And you can actually see how DHL did. Actually, NotPetya became a wonderful opportunity for them because with TNT's inability to do anything that it's supposed to do, it lost a lot of customers. They defected to DHL in an instant because if your business depends on moving packages, then you can't sit around and wait. What's really instructive is that TNT and DHL are publicly traded companies, and they have to disclose information. So you can look at the DHL financial disclosures following NotPetya. You can see their revenue, their profit, the shipping volumes are all going up. They are making out like bandits, and only because they kept their doors open when their big competitor did not.
And this just kind of brings another piece to mind here of this whole puzzle is if you think about the ability of a company to recover from a ransomware attack, it's actually pretty interesting. The compared DLA Piper to the TNT. TNT was basically a commodity service. There are competitors who can quickly shift over to move package, your package from point A to point B. A professional services firm, unless they're going to be out of commission for months, the cost of moving your business is probably higher than just waiting for them to get back online. So this is another reason why certain types of companies are going to be more susceptible to rapid ransomware devastation compared to others, right? For DLA Piper, yes, it cost them a lot of money. I'm sure it cost a few clients here and there, but at the end of the day, you're talking 5 days. Most clients are going to just be like, all right, well, that's unfortunate, but we're not going to move our entire case because it would literally cost us, 10 times more
right.
to do that.
Whereas the switching costs are just enormous.
Right? But you take something like Colorado Timberline, which is a relative, it's a commodity type service, right? It's a marketing materials, it makes goods. There's lots of other companies that do that.
Right. Yeah, I could take my specs for the etched beer steins and just retransmit them to a competitor of Colorado Timberline, and I have to pay twice, which really bothers me, but I can still get what I need.
Exactly. And so I think the message here from a private equity standpoint would be, hey, look, not only do you need to be doing cybersecurity risk assessments on all of the businesses that you invest in, and not only pre-investment, but also post-investment and on an ongoing basis, but also, tailor that amount of cybersecurity assessment and mitigation effort to the type of company that you're dealing with. I mean, I think there are some companies that just need to have a higher level of cybersecurity management than others, simply because they cannot survive. That they won't be able to survive if they are succumbing.
Right.
And that's just I think that's just another piece of the kind of overall puzzle that you're always dealing with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we beat this one to death.
I think we have.
So that wraps up this episode of the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. Today we talked about the major cyber risk of private equity firms. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us today on the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. Remember that cyber risk management is a team sport and should incorporate management, your legal department, HR, and IT for full effectiveness. Management's goal should be to create an environment where practicing good cyber hygiene is supported and encouraged by every employee. So, if you want to manage your cyber risks and ensure that your company enjoys the benefits of good cyber hygiene, then please contact us and consider becoming a member of our Cyber Risk Business Strategy Program. Find out more by visiting us at cyberriskopportunities.com and newmanlaw.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.